Well, it is 4 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. And uh, I think you know everybody on this side of the table, if you remember. This is John Sanford, who is an old friend that I'd asked to be involved with me on this project. John is from the area, done a lot of great work in the area, and um, been an architect, golf course architect, actually longer than me. So between the two of us, there's a lot of time in. Whether that does us any good or not, we don't know yet. But so what we're going to go over today is a presentation that we put together and uh, for last week when we did 6 in-person focus groups. This is going through the process of master planning, and it'll go through the some of the things that we found in starting the master plan, predominantly our evaluation. So master planning is a process. It starts with evaluating the main components of the golf course and practice facilities. We're looking at how these are functioning, where components are in their respective and expected lifespans. These components are the infrastructure that work together to support the ability to maintain the golf course and the practice facilities. Infrastructure is anything that impacts how a golf course practice facilities can be maintained. Those are things like irrigation, drainage, turf, structure of greens, bunkers, and even trees. Trees can impact the way we maintain the golf course because of shade. They can create turf quality challenges in that regard. We're not looking at how Clarence is doing his job at this point. Obviously, the golf course is in outstanding condition. Um, but that's really more of a snapshot of how we are today. What we're looking at is the condition of what Clarence works with, which is the infrastructure, as this becomes somewhat of a diagnosis of what is to come. As to timing, when you're looking at the renovation of infrastructure, it is best to address those things before they become problems, or as the analogy would be, don't wait until the bridge has fallen in the river to fix it. It's at best to address as much of the entire infrastructure as possible at the same time because it all works together and will work best if it is all renewed at the same time. This also limits the need for maintenance-related renovation for many years to come. So you're not having to do things on a too often of a basis. There's most of the things, the infrastructure, have a general lifespan of approaching 25 to 30 years. And if you can do it all at one time, you're basically moving down to where the next major renovation is going to be 25, 30 years from now. And in the interim, you're better set up to be able to maintain the course and fine tune things. We look at the golf course from a playing quality and style aesthetic perspective. That's how the golf course plays for all types of players and what it looks like or what we as golfers experience in the landscape. As maintenance related renovation renews infrastructure, we want to make sure that this results in a fun, strategically interesting golf course to play for everyone, wider margins for error and fewer unnecessary challenges for the average to higher handicap players, thoughtful smaller margins for error along more aggressive lines of play for the better players. And challenge by design and course setup is relative to the player, as your better player is going to be playing to make pars and birdies, while the average higher to higher handicap player is primarily looking to make pars and bogeys. So it's all relative. We want the style and the aesthetics of the golf course to fit sustainably so that what we experience playing is more natural and more maintainable. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail. We look at the practice facilities. We want to make sure that there are a variety of options for warm up before play, and there are a multitude of ways to figure it out in practice. Variety of practice option is the key. So we want to be able to have the short game area basically give you every type of shot you might see on the golf course. Also have areas where you can work more on technique in the short game area. So one is technique, one is feel, and then have the driving range such that we have as many options there. One of the challenges with the range right now is the fact that it's a little on the short side, and we have some room to improve that. Theming is the next step in the process. Creating themes, or what we call criteria, guide design relative to infrastructure, playing quality, and style aesthetics. We'll develop a number of different themes, which we already have, but one might be rebuilding the greens to USGA specs so that this critical part of the infrastructure is consistent course-wide. One may be to keep bunkers from being unnecessarily penal for the average to higher handicap player, being more strategically located for better players. Another may be opening up the site and using the unique scale of the property. Theming is something that we're going to be constantly developing. It may come out of our evaluation that we've done, and we'll tend to refine it as we move through planning and design. That's something that we constantly are looking for and refining to get as good and as tight as possible. Planning and design is the next step that completes the master planning process. That's where we're developing preliminary design, researching the best materials to use, looking at how to make use of existing materials as efficiently as possible and to be more efficient, developing detailed cost estimates, looking at the most most effective schedule for construction. We are in planning design at the moment. We've created some preliminary design that has allowed us to conservatively look at scope of work and develop some cost estimates that have also been conservatively done at this point. As we spend more time on site with the long range planning committee and with members, we'll be fine tuning preliminary design and getting that into final design in the next month or two. The evaluation that we do is intended to be highly objective. This is not necessarily where we're going to be providing solutions, but we're looking to record the current state of many of the different elements that make up the golf course and the practice areas. However, as an evaluation, we're going to be providing input on what we could see be better, strong points to build on, and possibly look for opportunities to enhance what exists. Today, we're primarily focusing on infrastructure, but we will touch a little bit on playing quality and the style and aesthetics of the golf course. So infrastructure, again, is anything that impacts maintenance, and one of the most important is providing water efficiently and effectively to the turf around the course and on the practice facilities. Irrigation is the lifeblood of playing quality. Modern irrigation systems are a lot more efficient with water use, providing a higher level of control and with pipe that will last much longer, which is significantly different than just even 15, 20 years ago. The current irrigation system was installed in 2003, with some of the components being older than that. PVC pipe was used during the last install, which will tend to last 20 to 25 years before wear and tear starts to create an inefficient use of time to regularly repair leaks and breaks, which diminishes the use of the system as a whole as those repairs are made. This system will be 25 years old in 2028, so we're at the point where it's getting too old. The existing pump system is relatively new and should last for some time, but overall it's time to rebuild the irrigation system, obviously not including the pump system. Turf is another part of the quality or part of the infrastructure of maintenance. I consider it the skeleton of basic playing quality. Having the infrastructure of turf sound is vital. Sound turf is a part of pure turf, void of any other types of turf. When you have multiple types of turf, you have a challenge with maintenance and it can be time consuming. The different types of turf are going to need different amounts of water and different levels of and types of fertilizers. They react differently to mowing frequency and mowing heights, among a number of other things. They result in lower playing quality over time when you have too many different types. We currently have as many as 5 different types of turf on the tees, the fairways, and the roughs, when there should just be one. This invasion of the different types of turf is mostly due to not getting rid of the older varieties that were on the course or in the ground when the course was last regrassed. It is a challenge to properly do that, but it's evident that that wasn't as successful as you really want it to be the last time around. It is time to regrass the golf course, removing the existing turf so it will not return. Eradicating it is another word we use. Using a single type of turf that we've all determined is the best fit for the site, the climate, and in producing the highest playing quality long term. We have a pretty good idea of what we're going to do, but Clarence and everybody involved will still be looking at different options until we're 100% sure. It is the most efficient time. The most efficient time to do this is as the irrigation system is being replaced. Um, we are also going to reduce the overall amount of turf, reverting to the native sandy surface in a number of areas. We're going to do this strategically, so it's not unnecessarily impacting play. It will generally reduce the overall time and expense required to maintain turf. One of the things we get often asked is what we're going to do going to save us money in maintenance cost. And it's not necessarily saving money, it's saving time. You're not going to reduce the maintenance budget because you've done something that makes one part of the process of maintaining the golf course more efficient. What you're going to do is use that time in other areas to make sure that other details are better. So saving time is as important as saving cost. The greens have the most complex structure of anything on the golf course made of natural materials. This structure, based on USGA specifications from top down, looks like this. One of the things that um, we'll look at is the sand organic layer. The top is of this is a 12-inch layer of a sand and organic mixture that's placed over a 4-inch gravel layer. That gravel is sized very specifically to be able to bridge the sand and organic layer, and it has a couple of different functions that we'll talk about here in a minute. Constructed properly, this USGA specified type of green has a lifespan of 20 to 30 years, longer if maintained properly from day one. The current greens vary. 10 were built in 2003, but with construction methods and quality we're not sure of. There's a possibility that some of the greens mix is a little varied. But these greens are going to be 25 years old in 2028, so they're at that point where they need to be rebuilt. 8 were built in 2016, but not to USGA specifications, so that maintenance tactics on these greens can be quite different from the other 10 over time. It is best, if not vital, long term, to have all the greens be of the same construction method, be constructed with a high level of quality control, and all be the same age to be able to maintain the greens as best as possible over time. Of note, there are some off types starting to occur in the greens, mainly in the 10 greens that were not rebuilt in 2003 but just regrassed, which is an indicator it is time to regrass greens, likely due to not getting rid of old grass as well as possible when it was last regrassed. Same thing with the fairways. As this off type spreads in greens, it can have a negative impact on putting quality. You may see a ball that starts to roll and wiggle a little more when it hits one of those spots. You can note, you can identify that on the older greens in particular as being some little light green areas that are within the greens. All greens should be rebuilt to US state specification, and it is best done if it is done in the same year to ensure consistency. It's challenging enough to find the right materials. It's very difficult if we do it over a 2-year period to have that be consistent. The 10 greens that were built in 2003 largely retain the original architecture design intent from 1969 and the Jolie original design. And we feel like those should be restored to match up the original design intent with modern green speeds. There are places on those greens where some of the slopes are a little quick for the greens that Mr. Clarence keeps the ball rolling. But the other 8 should be designed to fit the other 10 architecturally. We want them to have a similar theme, similar feel. We certainly want them to have variety, but we don't want them to be vastly different from each other. Bunkers used to be a hazard for better players, but today they're a playing surface with a fairly complex structure. This is a byproduct of most players wanting more consistency in the maintenance of the sand in the bunker. Purists like myself would rather see the bunker still be a hazard with simple construction and maintenance methods, but most golfers just simply don't see it that way. Today, we build bunkers with very specific methods geared towards more efficient maintenance and providing consistency in the play and quality of the sand. So we're shaping them to drain better and spread more drainage over a flatter bottom that is a higher percentage of total bunker size, with steeper faces to resist plug lies that allow a ball to get back to the flatter surface where there is a more consistent sand density. We use perforated drainage in very specific patterns under the bunkers. We use liners today that fit the climate and the sand being used, which is installed after shaping and drainage. This enhances drainage, holds sand in faces, and keeps bunker sand pure. Significantly better materials than were available just 10 years ago, um, and proven. We've been using a product that we would recommend here that's used quite a bit that has a longer lifespan, but the ones that were more proven back in that era just didn't last as long. We're also testing sands to make sure that it drains well, that it sets up well, and it has the capability of being maintained firm or not as firm. So back in the, 20 years ago, my bunker detail and John's as well would have been more simple. It would have had this graphic that shows how we want the bunkers to be built from a sliced or section view. And then we would have typically had a few little notes. And today, the complexity of a bunker structure is such that I can barely fit all the notes on one page. And so a lot more complex structure. But basically what we're doing is we're building bunkers with steeper faces that are going to resist plug lies better. They're going to actually look more aesthetically pleasing. They're going to stand out a little more from the fairway. And then the bottom here is going to end up being a pretty large percentage of the entirety of the bunker. Most of the bottom is going to be 3 to 5% slope, so water management and retention is pretty consistent. So there's four factors relative to the need to have the infrastructure of the current bunkers renewed. The current bunkers were not shaped to drain as well and reduce plug lies. There's a lot more soft faces and slopes in these bunkers. Prior to about 2016, the bunkers liners only had a 7 to 10 year lifespan. The current liners are going to be 12 years old in 2028, and they're already showing signs of not functioning very well. The current bunkers have no specific irrigation for bunker turf edges, which results in overwatering around the bunker in order to adequately water bunker edges. Or it could go the other way. We might not adequately water bunker edges to keep from being too wet around the bunkers themselves. Today's construction methods can push the lifespan of the liner to over 20 years, and that's really the determining factor for when a bunker really needs a complete renovation is when that liner quits functioning properly. I'd mentioned that we've used certain materials, and John has as well down here in this area. I've used them in other parts of the country, and I did one about 25 years ago that's still functioning properly. But it takes a while for these things to become tested to the point where we know that they are what they do. We want to make sure that they do what they say they're going to do, and we see that over time. As new irrigation is installed and the course is regrassed, this is the most cost-effective and by far the most efficient time to rebuild the bunkers. It also gives an opportunity for us to locate bunkers in the best locations at really no additional cost. Better locations will greatly improve the playing enjoyment of the average to higher handicap player and make the game more strategically interesting for the better players. So I've got a graphic of the sixth hole. The current sixth green has two bunkers that are not really impacting the better players that often, while these bunkers significantly reduce the margin for error for the average to higher handicap player trying to play shots into the green. Because right there where those two bunkers are about the only place that the average to higher handicap player has to effectively miss the green without having to take it over the water. One thing of note is that your better players are going to be better from greenside bunkers than they are from rough and even the shortcut areas around the green. The average to higher handicap player, though, is much less skilled in bunker shots relative to their ability to play from the rough or shortcut areas around the green. So this is showing a concept plan to redesign the sixth green, which is not one of the original greens. It had been rebuilt in 2016. This is expanding the green to the left and along the front left, creating some hole locations, one right tight to the water and another on the front left that will be fronted in the left side here by a drop off to a shortcut area, and then same and behind that green, it'll drop off into a shortcut area. Um, the removal of the bunkers is going to add interest for all types of players, while the aggressive line over the lake on the right is still a considerable challenge. One thing of note is that we're going to, the concept plan is to push the back tee on number 5 further right. So that creates more room for us to open this up and get it less claustrophobic than it is now, as it is now to some extent. Another thing about relocating bunkers is not just to make it easier for the average to higher handicap player, but sometimes it can be to better challenge the better player in this case. Relocating the bunkers on number 15, as a part of that infrastructure work, results in fairway bunkers being a better fit to give the average to higher handicap player a wider margin where the fairway bunkers were. But it's going to better challenge the aggressive play off the tee by the better player, because this is about where most of the better players are going to land the ball. And so pushing those bunkers out is going to challenge that aggressive tee shot. And it's actually going to give them more of a reason to want to play short of those bunkers because with a wider fairway here, it gives you a better angle into these front left hole locations. But of interest to the back right hole locations, being down this right-hand side, especially with a wider fairway, is not quite as good an angle. One of the things that John and I found in studying the old greens, this green wasn't rebuilt in 2016, but we have noticed that over time it's been altered a little bit. And one of the ways in which it was is that the back right portion of the green was brought in some. So we're proposing expanding it back out over there, which gives us even more interesting hole locations on that right side. So tees are um, um, pretty easy here because the lifespan of the structure of a tee on this native sandy soil at Turtle Creek is primarily tied to how level the tee is, or levelness. That is basically a consistent percentage of slope from one side of the tee to the other. This is going to result in a more consistent water holding in the tee and a more consistent cut when mowing. This is going to result in higher playing quality. So you can just imagine that if you've got a level tee, even though it's got a little bit of slope from one side to the other, it's going to hold water more consistently than if a tee has some little humps and bumps in it. And likewise, you're going to have better mowing if you don't have those little humps and bumps. The tees should be re-leveled about every 7 to 10 years. The current tees have not been re-leveled in the past 10 years. We're not sure the last time that they were re-leveled. And they're not bad, but they definitely have some little humps and bumps. Of note, if there's a need to replace irrigation and regas the golf course, which we've noted here, the process of leveling tees is a lot more efficient and less expensive than re-leveling each individual tee on their own in a phased effort. So if you had to go in and re-level every tee on its own, just stripping the grass at the tee and around, it's a lot more expensive and time consuming than if you are regrassing everything and aren't having to work tightly around existing turf and irrigation. We also found that we need larger tees on the par threes, which is a vital part of a sound infrastructure. Um, the tees here on par threes are too small, mainly where we have the heaviest amount of traffic. And there's a number of places on the par threes here where the tees are a bit long for the most forward tees. And so it gives us some room to be able to stretch things out and be able to move tees around so that we don't have one area getting pounded the way it is now. So drainage for fairways and roughs that capture nuisance. Well, drainage on a golf course is basically made up of two things. One is nuisance water, how we capture that and move it around, and then storm water that moves water off-site in larger storm events. Both have an important role in turf quality management, access to the course after rains, and reduction of damage from storms. The two components of nuisance water drainage are the small drain grates that you see around the course and the fairways and roughs that are connected to smaller pipe. That's generally speaking going to be a 12-inch basin or smaller, a drain basin or smaller, and they're usually connected to some sort of pipe that's less than 8 inches. That's going to be your nuisance flow. The other part of nuisance drainage is slope on the fairways. Surface drainage should be course around the course should be better. but there's too much area that doesn't slope at the 2.5% that we consider to be a minimum. Reshaping to enhance surface slope is vital, which can be efficiently done when regrassing and installing new irrigation. I'm going to jump back up because I missed one point here in that the current system of small drain grates and smaller pipe actually function pretty well now and are in pretty decent locations. There's not going to need to be a whole lot of work to make some minor improvements there. Storm drainage is the larger pipe in the drain grates, usually being pipe that's over 10 inches or drain grates that are over 18 inches. These are what move water to the lake on number two, which is then carried off site via a canal that goes into the Loxahatchee River. There are a few places or areas of concern that we need to address on the golf course relative to larger storm drainage. We're still working through the engineering of those, but we have a basic plan to solve those issues, and that's going to basically be dealing with the driving range, areas on number 12, the larger area at 13T, and number 16. We'll also be looking at number 10 as when we do have storms there, the water can get up and out of into the fairway there, and we can see some of that rising on other parts of 13 as well. So there's some areas to work on, but we've got a pretty good plan as to how to address that. Just have to solve all the engineering nuances. So maintenance along lakes can be one of the most time-consuming parts of golf course maintenance if you have some issues. Maintenance of turf along the banks and edges, and maintenance of the edges to address erosion. Um, Ease of maintaining lake banks is a product of being able to mow down to the water's edge as efficiently as possible. This is best when the slope of lake banks near the edge is not above 20%. Um, and that's basically making sure that it's not too steep along the edge so that mowers can get through there easily. And we'll also talk about the playing quality of that because it can also kick a ball in the water more easily. There's some work to do on that course wide, and as I mentioned, and working on that will get the playing quality a bit better. Maintenance of the lake edges is also best when mowing can be efficient and there's infrastructure that helps to hold the edge in place to contain erosion. So the current rock walls help to protect the lake edge from erosion, but they create a very difficult edge at the top of the wall to maintain. I'm sure some of you have noticed that the fabric behind the walls is showing in places. We've got some areas that will subside. It's difficult to maintain a clean cut edge along there, so it can add to the time. We don't need the rock wall above water to protect the lake edge or to serve the primary infrastructure purpose. We just need what's below water. Better use of this rock would be to expand protecting edges along more in-play lake edges, possibly with crushed rock to function better, crushing the rock we have, using simple low-growing and not too dense aquatic plants in more of the out-of-play areas. One example of that is to the right of the lake on number one. If you look across the lake from the green, there are some low-growing reed grasses that function really well in that regard. This would result in grass lake banks and edges that are easier to maintain. It would also be more of a natural fit on site and consistent with the original architectural design intent of having turf edges along lakes. So Joe Lee's original design had no walls. It was just grass down to the edge. And one of the purposes for that was to give the golf course a more natural feel has a greater sense of place. So we'll look at some of what I've done, what we're talking about as far as the lake walls. The top of the lake wall here is where we have one of the bigger issues, not necessarily just on 10, but on all the tops of the walls that are made out of the limestone. As noted, the top of the wall has to be maintained by hand, and you can end up with small depressions that have to be worked through and filled up and so forth. Um, the wall above the water also serves to require the average to higher handicap player to carry more than just the lake. They now got to get it up above the wall. And on a hole like number 10, when they do that, they're carrying a longer club into a green that slopes away and balls easily end up in the water behind the screen. So want to change that up a bit. So this is a redesign of 10 that takes out the wall. Keeping in mind this was not an original green. Removes the rock material above the water level, lays the lake banks down so they're easier to maintain along through here and along just on the left side of the green. Um, what this is going to do is better reward the aggressive shot that's played at the green. The green will be redesigned so that the slopes don't fall all the way to the back. There'll be some containment there. There'll be room over the green before we get to the water, so that if a ball does get a bit long, it's not going straight into the water. And then we've provided room to the right to miss for the average to higher handicap player. Um, one of the things that I've found with the better players, and I'm guilty of it myself, is if I can miss a shot, especially a tougher shot like you tend to have into number 10, that's going to get in the back of my mind, makes it more difficult to focus on playing that more aggressive shot at the green. What we're doing over there is making it easier for the higher handicap player to make four or five, while pulling the focus away. The better player is bringing five into play. So I think it's a better fit here. The infrastructure of the cart pass is really good. We have a lot of area that we can move traffic on and off, and players themselves can get on and off. So your turf quality is going to be better when you have so many options to enter and exit the pass. The concrete paths that we have are mainly there to minimize the possibility of erosion of sand and heavy rain. So if we've got some slope, like on number 10, for example, that's helping to contain erosion. Some of it's unnecessary, but there are places where it may be more helpful, especially near tees. Concrete curbs help to curb cart traffic and wearing out turf along the turf edge, mainly at tees and greens. There are a few places that we would recommend using curbs where they are not now. But they're definitely a valuable part of the infrastructure, I believe. Trees and landscapes are another part of the infrastructure, as I mentioned earlier. Trees and shrubs can cast negative shade on the turf area, where turf quality is important. But there has to be a balance. We don't want to take all the trees out just to be able to grow grass everywhere. But we generally want to have turf quality be the higher priority. Most of the non-indigenous trees and shrubs that are on site require a lot more pruning and care than the indigenous trees and shrubs. So getting the landscape back to what it was more naturally or indigenous material is not going to only ease maintenance, it's going to give the golf course a better feel visually. It will restore the significant scale of the property that was an original architectural design intent and strong feature of the golf course. I've mentioned this in the focus group meetings, but one of the things that's unique about Turtle Creek is that it's a core golf course, meaning that you don't have holes that go in and out of homes on a regular basis. You're not having to cross streets. You don't have homes on both sides of a hole or both sides of two holes running up together. And so what that does is gives the property a really large scale, feel of scale. But that's only valuable if you can feel that. And taking out some of the what we're calling more exotic plant material that's not indigenous, opening the site up is going to restore that. So that's the talk on infrastructure. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about playing quality. One of the things to note is that this is going to be something that we're going to send out to everyone, and so in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of it in great detail, but I will explain what each of these things are as we work through it. One of the things that we look at when we're evaluating playing quality is flow, and that's how each hole fits into creating playing variety, interest, challenge, and at times drama. This is something so tangible that courses have stretches of holes with names on them, like a Amen Corner at Augusta National. There's the Bear Trap here at PGA National. This study helps us to learn how to integrate details into each hole so flow and playing interest is enhanced. There's two areas here that we really have uncovered and talked a good bit about. But one is that the first six holes on the golf course have water in play. That's going to have a bigger impact on the average to higher handicap player than it will the better player. And so when we're looking at the subtleties of how the average to higher handicap player can play those holes, we need to look at things that makes it less taxing for them because of the water. So it might be things like moving their tees to better angles, maybe shortening those holes a bit. It might be widening the fairway and taking fairway bunkers out where those players drive the ball, moving those same fairway bunkers down the fairway a little more so they're more in play for the better player. And so those are the things that can impact the way a golf course flows. And that flow is going to be a little different for your better players as compared to your higher handicap, your average to higher handicap player. The better player may be going through a run of holes that is fairly easy, even though the water is there, while some of the longer holes that don't have water might be more playable for the average to higher handicap player. There's also been a good bit of discussion about the 16th hole having been a really long, tough par four at one point in time, converting the current 10th hole to a par four from the original short par five that was there. Relative to having a more interesting flow, this was a good change. It creates more playing interest and variety at the end of the round. Number 15 and number 16 are now holes that can be opportunities to score, leading into what are and should be very tough 17th and 18th holes. And again, in flow, when we're looking at what do we do on 17 and 18, for example, we can do things to make those holes a bit more challenging because they should be. Whereas 15 and 16, we want to be a little more gettable. So we'll look at things, subtle ways to make those to where the players have a little bit better opportunity to score. Of note, the 10th hole, I think, is a tough par four, fits into that point in the round better as well. It concludes, it kind of creates a section of the golf course that's fairly challenging where you play eight, and even for some players, seven can be a challenging hole, but eight, nine, 10, I find the 11th tee shot to be difficult. And 12 is not the easiest hole. So you've got a good little stretch in there. And if anybody wants to come up with a name for that, we'll take names and maybe put some signage out there one of these days. But the flow of the golf course with 16 being a par five, definitely better. We're looking at strategic variety and how Um, and this is really made up of two things as we look at it from a design standpoint. How we're faced with differing shots by design and setup, and how many options we regularly have in those shots. Wind can impact this, which is a significant factor at Turtle Creek. But this study further allows us to integrate details into each hole so there is greater variety. So one element of design criteria is understanding typical wind directions along with shifts in directions. How the wind impacts play has to be known and considered in the pursuit of greater variety. We can't just look at the actual playing length or shot types void of wind. A good example going back to 10 is that that's going to be a hole where the better play is to hit somewhat of a draw into that hole, but it's often playing with a left to right wind of some whether it's either a little down or a little into you, and that can make it a challenge. So we have to be aware of that. So having more room right on that hole to miss and creating some subtleties over there that are interesting makes more sense because it's a lot more players are going to be playing it over there. So we'll study wind charts. This is the one from Jupiter and shows us your typical wind directions and wind speeds. And then we spend more time talking to everyone around here to find out where those variances are. Like every once in a while, you'll get a northerly wind, like I think we're having today, actually. And so we have to be aware of those as well. Um, as far as tees go, this is looking at the overall playing lengths and option players have to find a comfortable playing length, while also looking at the variety of playing lengths per the hole in the existing course to learn where there could be more variety. And this somewhat goes back to the previous slide in talking about wind. So we're looking at these playing lengths within that wind, but we're wanting to see where we can have better variety. And so this chart on the right side and the bottom right is showing where there's similar length holes of the same par. The par threes have some similar playing lengths. The white tee actually is set up to where there's fairly good variety, but from every other tee, there's at least two holes where they're similar. The blue tee, you're playing a very similar hole on number 8 and 17. And then number 3 and number 14 are very similar in playing length from the blue tee. So we want to try to do things that allow us to get better variety as a whole. One of the other things that we noticed is that we're basically missing a tee. I know that a lot of players play a white gold combo that's at about 5,800 yards, but it would be better to have a 5,800 yard tee. When you play a combo, there's going to be times where you're playing holes that are too long or possibly even too short, and not have the practical variety that we're looking for. And so having a tee that's designed to fit 5,800 yards on each hole works out better. And we'll talk a little bit about how we deal with that visually here in a second. Regardless of the functional nature and infrastructure of the bunkers, or the current style, the current bunkering at Turtle Creek could be much better from a playing quality perspective. Too many of the bunkers simply don't impact the better player, while being unnecessarily negative impacts on the playing quality, the playing enjoyment of the average to higher handicap player. Some bunkers have little to no real impact on any player, just being too far removed from play. So we want to make sure that the bunkers are having value. A well-bunkered golf course, every bunker is valuable in how they impact playing quality. They enhance playing interest in every instance. So we want to make sure that we're putting bunkers that are going to have an impact on the better player, not necessarily on the average to higher handicap player. We want to remove those that really are only impacting the average to higher handicap player and minimize the amount of that. We're not going to be restoring all of the bunkers in the original Joe Lee design. He had a lot of bunkers in that original design, but we will be allowing the original bunker layout to influence our design intent. This is authentic and of value and reemerging from the renovation of the infrastructure with a golf course that fits all members. Interesting greens for all types of players are greens that offer options to approach the green conservatively with wider margins for error and more aggressively with smaller margins for error. Options to miss a green in specific areas where reasonable recovery is viable. Interesting contours that don't necessarily subject the average to higher handicap player to three putts regularly, but challenge the better players in their ability to match up line and speed to make putts, especially birdie putts. As noted, there are 10 greens with strong character from the original design intent and 8 that we want to match up better to that original design intent. So our intent with the original 10 greens is going to be to adapt them to the modern game. Talked earlier about making sure they fit modern green speeds. And with the other 8 greens, just trying to restore them so they're that same theme and architectural lineage. We'll talk a little bit about here in a minute as well. Interesting roles in fairways and roughs impact players in two ways. Moving a ball as it bounces and rolls out, creating interesting stances and strategic locations the player has to compensate for, especially your better players. So in some places we might have a part of the fairway that has more movement where the better player may be driving the ball, whereas where the average to higher handicap player, that part of the fairway, uh, typically a little further from the green, may be flatter. Same thing with layup areas on par fives. Um, Width in fairways can also add interest and contribute to playing quality by providing the average to higher handicap player with some wider margins off the tee and into greens, strategically challenging the better player with smaller margins in their pursuit to make birdies. Primary problem with the current fairways tied to infrastructure is tied to infrastructure in that there are places without adequate slope to properly move water off the surface. This will allow us to enhance the playing quality as part of the renovation of the infrastructure. We created an overlay of the original Turtle Creek design over the current course so that we could study how the original design might influence us today with tees, bunkers, greens, and fairway shapes. So this is something that John and David Ferris, his partner, did to give us a chance to look at where the original bunkering and fairways and tees and how greens were shaped originally and how they are today. And we've learned some things for sure, and it's been helpful. From an aesthetic perspective, there are currently 5 tee markers used, which can stand out more than necessary, partly due to mowing rough around each tee. If you've got 6 tees and from the very back tees, the next tee up, they can look cluttered because you've got a lot of different tees out there in front. Some of that is being unnecessarily high. I see a lot of tees on the golf course that don't need to be as high as they are. If you were to walk a foot or two or even 3 feet down from the elevation of the tee, you're not going to see a whole lot less, if any. Part of this is also from having a lot of tees that are lined up right in a row. That creates a bit of clutter. It doesn't look as good visually. And in a lot of cases, it's not the best strategically for either the better player having an angle over here to the right, or with the average to higher handicap player or the shorter players playing a tee that's better angled from the left. We're recommending mowing fairway height to connect all the tees as best as possible, and it's not going to be feasible in some places because of pass and or water. But by mowing all the tees from the back of the tee all the way through to the fairway, you're going to eliminate a lot of these visual challenges. And what that's going to do is it'll allow you to add that 6 tee we talked about earlier, and it's not going to really stand out. What fits visually for greens at Turtle Creek is simply having greens that have nice roll, along with making sure they time the green surrounds in a very smooth and subtle way. You don't want greens on a classically styled golf course like Turtle Creek to stand out, but we want them to look like they're integral parts of the landform they are a part of. This is a good example of one. This is a sketch for a concept sketch for number 18. And you can just see how the green just fits into the surrounds really well. It's a classically styled type of green. And so we don't want greens to stand out. We want them to be a part of the landscape, really. One of the important factor in the style of bunkers, tracing the architectural lineage of Turtle Creek all the way back to William Flynn, is how bunkers of differing size in the same view line help to add a higher sense of style, contrast, enhanced variety, while altering depth perception sometimes. So if you've got bunkers that are of different sizes, they can make it more of a challenge to be able to know how far a shot's going to be played, whether it's into the green or layup area or off the tee. If two or more bunkers are grouped together in a cluster, it is best when these bunkers are not of the same size. And that's something that um, these guys, William Flynn, Joe Lee, Dick Wilson, that architectural lineage we have here, they did a lot of clustering of bunkers. Stylistically, each bunker here will be artistically shaped and edged, but in a classic, elegant way that is simple but full of detail that is really well done. So, uh, fairly simple, but with more movement in the lines a bit. Not as round, they'll be more artistically shaped, but very, very well done so that they have a very crisp quality to them. As a part of reducing turf, we will bring more native sand areas into view as well, but in a way that does not necessarily impact play. And so I did a sketch of how this might exist. So this is the eighth hole. Uh, Concept sketch here is to restore the bunker on the left, keep it about where it's at. This is a great green. We don't really need to do much to this green. The back left falls off a little hard. We probably need to slow that down a little bit. And, we can make a good argument that the right bunker is better off as partly rough and partly shortcut area. But we also can bring some of the native sand more into view to provide interesting contrast on the landscape, but do that in such a way that the forward tees are a little more over here to the right. They're not as big a factor playing quality wise. So this is one of the ways in which the bunkers will look and how we bring native sand into greater view. Um, Turf is basically, when it's pure, it's going to look good. If you don't have a whole lot of different colors and textures out there, it's going to look good. Lakes enhance the visual quality of a property by having an open space. They're a different texture, they're a different color, so they inherently add visual interest. The only thing that can diminish from that is hard to maintain edges and what are too many artificial elements like the rock walls here. It's very much an artificial element on a site like this, and the sense of place we have here. Getting the lake banks and edges to be easier to maintain while removing the artificial element of the rock walls is going to heighten the visual quality. Trees and landscapes, the more natural, the better. This will involve moving most of the non-indigenous trees and shrubs. The more open, the better the site is. As a core golf course, it's going to feel better, have a better, strong sense of large scale, have a better sense of place. So I want to just go over architectural lineage about Joe Lee real quickly, and then there's some more information about this trio of architects that you can read later. But Turtle Creek was designed by golf course architect Joe Lee and opened in 1969. He was one of the more respected architects of his generation, and his design at Turtle Creek is of value as we evaluate the golf course, primarily as it relates to playing quality and style and aesthetics. So as I mentioned earlier, going back and looking at what he had done originally. In working with many golf courses that have a valuable history, John and I have both done a lot of historic type restoration. And one of the things that we find is necessary is to dig a little deeper and look at what influenced the original architect, in this case, Joe Lee. There's just a lot we can learn and take away from that. There's a deep and interesting, valuable architectural lineage here, as Mr. Lee worked for renowned golf course architect Dick Wilson, who did places like Bay Hill and Doral and Pine Tree. Um, and Mr. Wilson then worked for William Flynn, who I regard as one of the best golf course architects in the history of the game. So, in studying Dick Wilson and William Flynn in depth over the years, as both John and I have done, you can certainly see there's a lot of exceptional design traits in the work that Joe Lee did here. We would be remiss to not allow the traits of this architectural lineage to enter our design themes where they can add value. So that's it. Again, this is going to be available for you guys to re-listen to it. And you can also then get a copy of the PDF of this and be able to study it through. And I think we do encourage, if you have any questions, to email Ted. So thanks for your time, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.